Hello everyone, I'm Miu from Susan's family. Today, I will teach you the crochet method for the Chinese Aesthetics series, Chinese Rain Bell Sweater. For this electronic tutorial, you can find the pattern chart on the website by searching for susud.com. This sweater comes in different sizes, and each size has both long and short versions. The crochet technique is similar. They are all divided into the main piece, the bordure and Chinese frog. The main piece is further divided into the back piece, front piece, and sleeves. The differences between the long and short versions will be explained separately. What needs to be explained is that multiple yarns need to be held together and knit as one when knitting. A yarn that requires 2 strands can be taken from both the center and outer ring of one skein at the same time, or you can take strands from 2 separate skeins simultaneously. The small sample is demonstrated using a single strand of yarn throughout. For the specific yarn, please refer to the chart to take the yarn. Gem twist needs to be split into 3 strands for crocheting. Please watch the demonstration for the detailed method of separating strands. Separate the gem twist into 3 strands. Take out the gem twist. If the yarn tail is too tight to pull, you can cut some of it off. Then pull apart the yarn tail. You can see that the yarn has been separated. Here you need to separate 3 strands, not just 1 strand. Just pinch the yarn tail at this end, enlarge the loop, and form the entire strand of gem twist into 3 staggered strands. If the left side can be unraveled smoothly, you can then treat these 3 strands as 1 yarn and combine them with other yarns for weaving. If it doesn't unravel smoothly, you can repeat the previous steps. This is the method to separate gem twist into 3 strands. Start with the back piece. It is divided into the body and the chest piece. The body is crocheted back and forth using the right hand long tail cast on method. Now let's take a look at the chart. Here, the small sample chart is illustrated using any one size as an example. 1 square in the chart represents 1 stitch, which corresponds to 1 loop when crocheting. Blank squares indicate knit stitches. The stitch for SK2 top, O, which means slip 1 stitches knit twice, knit 2 stitches together, pass slipped stitch over, is actually worked over 3 loops, but results in 1 loop after completion. This is represented by 1 square. The stitch techniques of K2 tog, knit 2 stitches together, and SKO, slip, slip, knit, can also be understood in this way. Arrows indicate the direction of crocheting. The right side always follows the chart from right to left, while the wrong side follows it from left to right. Pay attention that on the wrong side, you need to knit the stitches opposite to what's shown in the chart. Now please watch me demonstrate the specific crocheting method. Let's first learn the method for casting on. Please watch the demonstration. Start with a long tail cast on. Before casting on, you need to leave a yarn tail of a certain length. This is usually about 3 times the length of the piece. Refer to the chart for the exact length. Make a slip knot with the yarn tail. Pick up one end of a straight needle or circular needle with your left hand. Insert into the loop. Slightly tighten it. This is the first stitch. Hold the 2 strands of yarn with your right hand, inserting your thumb and index finger between these 2 strands. Note that the strand connected to the yarn ball should be hooked over your index finger, while the long tail end should be hooked over your thumb. Straighten the yarn. Insert the needle from the bottom up into the loop on your thumb. Then pick up from behind to front the yarn on your index finger. Draw this yarn through the loop on your thumb. Release the yarn from your thumb, slightly tighten it. This is the second stitch. Now cast on the third stitch, straighten the yarn. Insert the needle from the bottom up, into the loop on your thumb. Then pick up the yarn on your index finger from back to front again. Pass the yarn through the loop on your thumb. Release the yarn from your thumb, slightly tighten it. The third stitch is now complete. Continue to start the fourth stitch. First, insert the needle into the loop on your thumb. Then pick up the yarn on your index finger and pass it through the loop on your thumb. Release the yarn from your thumb, slightly tighten it. The fourth stitch is now complete. Pay attention to keeping the yarn connecting to the skein always hung on the index finger, and the reserved yarn hung on the thumb. Make sure not to get them mixed up. Continue casting on, in this manner, until you reach the desired number of stitches. This method is known as the long tail cast on. After completing the cast on, next knit row 1. Read the chart from right to left. All the symbols indicate knit stitches. Here, simply knit across. You can see the braid-like texture forming below. Row 1 is now complete. We will consider the side with the yarn tail on the right as the right side. Continue with row 2. Read the chart from left to right. Turn the work piece. Here on the wrong side you need to crochet the opposite stitches of the chart. That means to purl. You can see the tile unit texture forming below. Continue to complete this row. Row 2 is now complete. For the back piece of short version, start working the motif below. For the long version, you need to continue crocheting a few more rows of stockinette stitch. The technique is the same as rows 1 to 2. Please refer to the pattern to complete it. Let me demonstrate the stitch pattern using a small sample. The stitch count is small, so only the method is demonstrated. The row numbers discussed are based on the pattern rows. Everyone can learn the method first and then follow the chart to crochet. Everyone can learn the method first and then follow the chart to crochet. Start with row 1 of the motif. Begin knitting the corresponding number of knit stitches. The stitch count in the swatch is random. Then work 1 yarn over. Place the yarn from front to back on the right needle. This completes the yarn over. Continue with 1 spo. Slip 1 stitch, knit twice from the left needle. Then knit 1 stitch. Next, use the left needle to pick up the slipped stitch. Pass it over the knitted stitch and slip it off. The SPO is now complete. You can see that the right loop is above the left loop. This is also known as a SPO. Continue with 1 yarn over. Then work 1 SPO. Slip 1 stitch. Then knit 1 stitch. And pass the slipped stitch over the left stitch. The SPO is now complete. Continue with 1 knit stitch. Knit 2 stitches together on right side. This is also known as a K2 tog. When knitting, insert the right needle from left to right through these 2 loops at the same time. And knit 1 stitch. This completes the K2 tog. You can see that the left loop is above the right loop. Continue with 1 yarn over, work 1 K2 tog, inserting from left to right through these 2 loops. Just knit 1 stitch. The K2 tog is now complete. Continue with 1 yarn over. Knit the corresponding number of stitches. Pattern row 1 completed. Next, work the second row of the pattern. Knit all stitches as purl stitches. When you reach the yarn over position, just knit the purl stitch as usual. The second row is now complete. Continue the remaining rows of the pattern, referring to the chart for back and forth crochet. On the right side, crochet yarn over and stitches together. On the wrong side, crochet purl stitches. And we will encounter the stitch for SK2 tog. Here, I'll demonstrate this with a small sample. First, slip 1 stitch from left to right, then knit the next 2 stitches together as 1 knit stitch. Finally, pass the slipped stitch over the knitted stitch. The SK2 tog is now complete. As you can see, the loop on the right side is now at the top. Continue to follow the chart for the row numbers past the pattern. Let me explain how to count the rows of the back piece. Using a small sample, you can see the texture of the knit stitches forming these rows of braids, with each braid representing 1 row, starting from the bottommost braid. The small sample has a total of 13 rows. After finishing the last row on the right side of the pattern, you can place a stitch marker on the chain below the knitting needle to mark it. This makes it convenient to count the rows between patterns. Pay attention to start counting from the chain above the stitch marker. This is the method for counting rows. After mastering the pattern, Everyone should refer to the chart and complete the corresponding row numbers for the body, paying attention to the position of the patterns so as not to make any mistakes. The spaces between the patterns are all marked on the chart. Please complete them. Up to this point, we have finished explaining the body section. Next, we will learn about the chest piece. Begin by binding off underarm stitches on both sides. Then decrease stitches on both sides. In the middle, continue to follow the chart to crochet the pattern. Finally, work short rows to form the sloping shoulder. And leave space for the back neck position. Begin by binding off the corresponding number of stitches at the underarm on the first row, while casting on and knitting at the same time. Finish the ending with normal knitting. In the next row, bind off the corresponding number of stitches while knitting. Decrease stitches on both sides as you continue. The specific crochet method for the armpit area can be referenced in the video demonstration below. I will explain the method using this small swatch. At the beginning of the first row, you need to bind off several stitches in a row. The exact number of stitches refers to the chart. If there are several bind off symbols, it means to bind off that many stitches. In my case, I need to bind off 4 stitches in a row. If you need to bind off a large number of stitches consecutively, you can use stitch markers to separate them first. Start binding off. The first stitch can be either a slip stitch or a knit stitch. Here I choose to work a slip stitch. Then work 1 knit stitch. And proceed to pass the slip stitch over the knit stitch. Thus binding off 1 stitch. When there's no special instruction, always use the knit stitch to bind off on the right side. Continue to knit 1 stitch. Bind off 1 stitch. Continue to bind off while knitting, until there is only 1 loop remaining to the right of the marker. Here, I have 2 loops left, so I need to bind off 1 more stitch. There's only 1 loop remaining on the right side of the stitch marker, which is the loop of the 4th stitch. We need to bind off this stitch as well. Therefore, we need to knit 1 more stitch and bind it off. The next stitch is the last bind off symbol, the adjacent to this stitch. We directly knit it. Pay attention, since different motifs may have different stitch techniques. This stitch needs to be worked according to the chart. After finishing, bind off the 4th stitch as well. Bind off the 4th stitch as well. This way, the 4 stitches indicated in the chart are bound off. Continue to crochet following the chart. Pay attention that the next step should start from the 2nd stitch, next to the bind off symbol. Before knitting, slightly tighten this loop to prevent any noticeable holes. There are no special motifs here. We'll knit all the way across to finish this row. That concludes the first row. Continue with the second row. We will work this row on the wrong side. Also, start by binding off 4 stitches at the beginning. First, separate them with a stitch marker. Start binding off the stitches. Similarly, the first stitch can be either a slip stitch or a purl stitch. Here, I will knit a slip stitch. Then knit 1 purl stitch. And pass the first stitch over the second stitch. Which binds off 1 stitch. Continue with another purl stitch, and bind off 1 stitch. When there are no special instructions, working on the wrong side means binding off while knitting purl stitches. Continue to bind off while knitting purl stitches, until there is only 1 stitch remaining to the right of the marker. Here, we will bind off 1 more stitch. Now there's only 1 stitch remaining to the right of the marker, which is the loop of the 4th stitch. You'll also bind off this stitch. So you need to knit 1 more stitch and then bind off the next stitch, which is also the stitch adjacent to the last bind off symbol. Is worked as a purl stitch on the wrong side. Binding off the 4th stitch. When actually knitting, refer to the pattern chart for the specific stitch technique. This way, the 4 stitches shown on the chart will be bound off. Continue following the chart for crocheting. Pay attention that the next round should start from the second stitch, next to the bind off symbol. Before knitting, slightly tighten this loop. To prevent a noticeable hole. There's no special pattern here. We knit all stitches as purl. Now, we have finished the second row. Next, bind off on the right side. Using the same method as row 1. Bind off on the wrong side. Using the same method as row 2. I will demonstrate 2 more rows. Continue with working the third row. At the beginning of this row, we need to bind off 2 stitches. First, bind off 1 stitch. On the right side, work the knit stitch and bind off. Then work another knit stitch and bind off. Pay attention when binding off the last stitch. The stitch pattern for this stitch should be based on the chart. Sometimes the pattern is special, so it may not necessarily be a knit stitch. Be sure not to make a mistake here. The wrong side is the same. Now I've just bound off 2 stitches. Continue to complete this row. Once done, proceed with row 4. At the beginning of this row, bind off 2 stitches as well. First, bind off 1 stitch. On the wrong side, work the purl stitch and bind off. Then work another purl stitch and bind off. This way, we've bound off 2 stitches. Continue to complete this row. Now I have finished row 4. If only 1 stitch needs to be decreased on both sides, then do it in the same way as the first decrease method mentioned earlier. This is the method for binding off underarm stitches. After completing the underarm decreases, continue knitting downwards. Finally, work the short rows for the sloping shoulder. During the crocheting process, bind off at the neck opening. Let me briefly explain the knitting sequence here. For the row below the neck opening decreases, start with short rows on the right side. Then knit the corresponding position for the right shoulder. Note that the left and right here refer to the left and right when the garment is worn. Decrease at the neckline on the left side while knitting, and continue short rows on the right side. After completing, do the bind off on the wrong side. Next, join yarn and bind off at the neck opening. Then continue knitting the left shoulder. While knitting, decrease at the neckline on the right side, and perform short rows on the left side. After completing, bind off on the wrong side in the same manner. Let's go over the methods for short rows. Binding off with slip stitch, and decreasing stitches at neck opening. You can learn the methods first. Then combine them with the video, and refer to the pattern charts. To complete this section of knitting, please see the demonstration of leaving stitches on the right side for short rows. You can see that here you need to work 6 short rows. The first row is worked on the wrong side, leaving 5 stitches unworked at the end. I have already completed this. The second row is worked on the right side. First, make a yarn over like this on the right needle. Next, work 1 slip stitch. Then knit 1 by 1, accordingly, finishing this row. After completing, continue to work row 3. At the end of this row, apart from the first 5 stitches, reserve another 4 stitches unworked. Pay attention that the lifted stitch is not included in this count. Once completed, continue with row 4. The method is identical to row 2. First, yarn over once. Then make a slip stitch. And finish the row according to the chart. For row 5, leave another 4 stitches unworked at the end. Similarly, the lifted stitch is not included. The method for row 6 is also the same as row 2. I will continue and finish these 2 rows. Now, I have completed the short rows. The final step is to work one more row. To eliminate the row discrepancy, commonly known as closing the row, work purl stitches evenly until the last stitch before the yarn over. Once done, change the place of the yarn over and the first stitch on the left side. Then purl them together. Each time you reach the yarn over position, switch the yarn over with the stitch on the left side. Then knit them together as a purl stitch. Continue to complete the rest of the row. Now, the row discrepancy has been eliminated. Let's take a look. This is the effect on the right side. And this is the effect on the wrong side. This is the short row technique with held stitches on the left side. You can see that 6 short rows need to be worked here. For the first row, work on the right side. Leave 5 stitches unworked at the end. I have already completed this row. For the second row, work on the wrong side. First, make a yarn over on the right needle. Don't make the lifted stitch too loose. Then work one slip stitch. Then, purl evenly. To complete this row, once done, continue with row 3. at the end of this row, besides the initial 5 stitches. Leave 4 more stitches unworked. Note that the lifted stitch is not included in this count. Once completed, continue with row 4. The method is identical to row 2. Start by making a slip knot with 1 stitch. Then work 1 slip stitch. Continue following the chart to finish this row. For the upcoming row 5, leave 4 more stitches unworked at the end. Similarly, the slip knot does not count. The method for row 6 is also the same as row 2. I will continue to finish these 2 rows. Now, I have completed the short rows. One more row needs to be worked. To eliminate the row discrepancy, commonly known as closing the row, knit 1 by 1 evenly until the stitch before the yarn over. Once done, work a knit stitch together with the yarn over and the leftmost stitch. Every time you reach the yarn over position from now on. You should knit together the yarn over and the 1 stitch on the left side. Continue to finish this row. Now, the row discrepancy has been eliminated. You can take a look. This is the effect on the right side. And this is the effect on the wrong side. Sometimes, to make the row counts match on both sides, you need to knit 1 more row. Just follow the pattern chart specifically for the crochet. Let's learn a commonly used neckline decrease method, which involves decreasing stitches by knitting stitches in a way to create the desired curve. Suppose this is the front neckline. Therefore, this side is the left shoulder, and this side is the right shoulder. Sometimes, the shoulders require short rows. There are no short rows here. I'll only explain the neckline decrease. Let's start with the left shoulder. This chart has fewer stitches, and we will focus on explaining the method. First, knit the first row of the neckline. So here, you just knit 13 stitches. If there are a large number of stitches, you can first separate these stitches with stitch markers, before continuing to knit. I have already completed the first row, leave the remaining loops on hold. Next, knit the second row. The second row is worked on the wrong side. You can see that, at the beginning of this row, you need to continuously decrease 3 stitches. If we need to bind off a large number of stitches in a row, we can use a stitch marker to separate them first. Begin binding off. You can start with 1 slip stitch. Then work 1 purl stitch. And pass the first stitch over the second stitch. This will bind off 1 stitch. Continue with another purl stitch. And bind off another stitch. When there's no special instruction, working on the wrong side means binding off while purling. There is 1 stitch remaining to the right of the marker, which is the third stitch loop. We need to bind off this stitch. Therefore, you need to knit 1 stitch, and then bind it off. This next stitch is the one adjacent to the last bind off symbol. Here, we will simply work a purl stitch. Pay attention, as the stitch techniques may vary for different patterns. This stitch should be worked according to the chart. After finishing, bind off the third stitch. This way, the 3 stitches shown in the chart will be bound off. Continue to follow the chart for knitting. Note that the next stitch should start from the second stitch, beside the bind off symbol. Before knitting, slightly tighten this loop to prevent a noticeable hole. There are no special patterns here, so we will knit all stitches as purl stitches. Now, we have finished the second row. Next, work row 3, refer to the chart, and knit all stitches. I have already completed it. Continue with row 4. Here, just bind off 2 stitches at the beginning. The method is identical to row 1. Start with 1 slip stitch. Then work 1 purl stitch. Bind off 1 stitch. Continue with another purl stitch. And bind off 1 more stitch. Slightly tighten the loops. Then work all remaining stitches as purl stitches, and finish row 5 as well. Now, I have completed row 5. Continue with row 6. For the beginning of this row, just bind off one stitch. The method is identical to binding off the first stitch in row 1. After completing that, work all remaining stitches as purl stitches. The remaining 7th row and 9th row are all knit stitches. Row 8 is identical to row 6. Starting with binding off one stitch. For row 10, don't bind off, just knit the purl stitches as usual. Now, I have finished these 10 rows. In the end, there should be 6 stitches remaining. Next, we will work on the right shoulder. Before continuing, we need to first bind off 9 stitches in the middle. You can use a stitch marker to separate them. Pick up the new yarn. Make a slip knot with it. And slightly tighten the loop. First, knit 2 stitches. Then bind off one stitch. Knit one more stitch. Bind off one stitch again. When there are no special instructions, working on the right side means binding off while knitting. Continue to bind off the remaining stitches. Similarly, pay attention when closing to bind off the last loop. This stitch should be the first stitch on the left side of the bind off symbol. Refer to the chart and crochet the corresponding stitch techniques. Here, we continue to knit stitches and bind them off. After completing this, start from the second stitch and finish the row. Then, knit all stitches in the second row, as purl stitches on the wrong side. Now I have completed the second row. Continue with the third row. Start by binding off 3 stitches in a row. You can begin with 1 slip stitch and 1 knit stitch. Then bind off 1 stitch. Continue knitting and binding off stitches. Now, 3 stitches have been bound off. Continue to finish the 3rd row, and complete the 4th row as well. Now I have finished the 4th row. At the beginning of the 5th row, bind off 2 stitches. Using the same method as the first 2 stitches of the 3rd row, the beginning of rows 7 and 9 are both bind off 1 stitch, using the same method as binding off the first stitch in row 3. I will continue to finish the remaining part of the right shoulder. Now I have finished the right shoulder. There should be 6 stitches remaining here. This way, the method of decreasing stitches for this neckline has been explained. You can bind off while purling. Usually, after finishing the garter stitch, you can use this method on the wrong side. In this case, when binding off, first knit 2 purl stitches. Then use the left needle to pick up the first stitch. Pass it over the second stitch. And drop it off the needle. This binds off 1 stitch. Continue with another purl stitch, placing the first stitch over the second stitch. This way, you have bound off another stitch. We will continue to bind off the rest. Each time, finish off by working purl stitches. When there is 1 loop left, refer to the ending of the first situation to secure and weave in the end. This concludes the explanation of binding off while knitting purl stitches, and that concludes the explanation for crocheting the back piece up to this point. Let's continue with the front piece, which is divided into section 1 of the body, section 2 of the body, and the chest piece. First, we will learn section 1 of the body, which is divided into the first part, and the second part for crocheting. The new stitch techniques used include the double stitch, slip stitch with a knot, knit stitch through back loop on right side, and backwards loop. The first section is worked back and forth, using the right hand long tail cast on method. To create the curve, work short rows with increases on the right side, and work even on the left side. Work the pattern as usual. After finishing the short rows section of the short version here, leave a 10 cm yarn tail and break yarn. After completing the short rows section of the long version, you still need to increase stitches on the right side. Let's learn the method of increasing stitches and short rows in this part, referring to the method of short rows on its right side. Complete the short row section according to the chart of the first part. For short row increases, for example, in this chart, start the short rows from row 2, and at the ending, leave the total stitches that need to be worked short on this side without knitting. I have already completed row 2. Start row 3 with a double stitch. The double stitch is identical here as previously mentioned. Then, reserve the total number of stitches that need to be worked short rows on this side without knitting. Finish the positions of the double stitch in row 4 first. Then work the corresponding number of additional stitches. Here, I will work 5 additional stitches. For every row at the short row position, add the corresponding number of stitches at the end. That is, after finishing the double stitch position. Knit the corresponding additional number of stitches. Repeat this process. To finish these 11 rows. After finishing the last row with the placement of the double stitch, work 4 additional stitches, perfectly using up all the loops. After finishing the short row section, break the yarn for the short version, stop working and leave the stitches on the needle. To make it convenient for crocheting the second part, you can hold stitches of the first part. Note that for the long version, do not hold stitches at this point. For the specific method of holding stitches, please see the demonstration. Then I'll demonstrate the method for holding stitches. After completing one side, transfer the loops to a separate straight needle or circular needle. You can also thread them with yarn. When you resume knitting later, transfer them back to the needle. Thread from right to left. This completes the process of holding stitches. After completing the short rows for the long version, you still need to increase stitches. Here, I will demonstrate the method of increasing stitches. For the short version, you can skip this part. Start by working one row on the wrong side. The swatch has been knitted to the end, with one stitch remaining. On the second to last stitch at the end, work a yarn over. Then work the last stitch as a purl stitch. Here, make sure to bring the yarn to the front of the piece before working the stitch. This will add an extra stitch. Continue with the next row. Work knit stitches on the right side. Knit stitch through back loop at the yarn over position. Insert the needle under the strand of yarn at the back and work a knit stitch. The K1 TBL is now complete. Continue working knit stitches. This completes the section for increasing stitches. This creates a crossed strand below. All the increases in the next section are worked using this method. Please refer to the pattern and finish knitting the first section of the long version. Finally, leave a 10 cm yarn tail and fasten off. Pause your knitting here. You can also place the loops on hold if you prefer. This concludes the explanation for the first part. Next, we will learn the second part of section 1. Use the left hand long tail cast on method. Crochet back and forth. Please refer to the demonstration for the specific cast on method. For the long tail cast on method, before casting on, you need to leave a yarn tail of certain length, usually about 3 times the length of the piece. The specific length should be referred to the pattern chart. Make a slip knot with the yarn tail. Pick up one end of a straight needle or circular needle. With your right hand, insert into the loop. Slightly tighten. This is the first stitch. Hold both strands of yarn with your left hand. Insert your thumb and index finger between these two strands. Note that the strand connected to the yarn ball should be on your index finger. The long tail should be on your thumb. Straighten the yarn. Insert the needle from the bottom up into the loop on your thumb. Then pick up the yarn on your index finger from behind to front. Pull the yarn through the loop on your thumb. Release the yarn from your thumb. Slightly tighten. This is the second stitch. Now start the third stitch. Straighten the yarn. Insert the needle from the bottom up into the loop on your thumb. Then pick up the yarn on your index finger from behind to front. Pull the yarn through the loop on your thumb. Release the yarn from your thumb. Slightly tighten. The third stitch is now complete. Continue to start the fourth stitch. First, insert the needle into the loop on your thumb. Then pick up the yarn on your index finger. And pull it through the loop on your thumb. Release the yarn from your thumb. Slightly tighten. The fourth stitch is now complete. Note that the connecting yarn should always be held on the index finger, while the reserved yarn is held on the thumb. Be mindful not to switch their positions. Continue casting on, following this method. until you reach the required number of stitches. This method is called the long tail cast on. Once the casting on is done, the first row is worked in purl stitches on the wrong side. Then, turn your work and continue knitting. The side where the yarn tail is on the left will be the right side. Follow the chart to knit. Work even on the right side. Work short rows on the left side. The method is the same as demonstrated in the previous video, on increasing stitches with short rows. The technique for the left section is identical. After completing the longer short row section, you will need to increase stitches. The method for increasing stitches is the same as in the first section's long increase. End the last row on the wrong side. The second section has one more row than the first section. Do not cut the yarn at the end. Everyone, complete this part. This concludes the explanation for section 1. Next, we will knit section 2 of the body. Continue knitting from the end of the second part of section 1 without cutting the yarn. Here, I will demonstrate the first row using a sample swatch. Knit the loops of the second section on the right side. The short row section is on the left side here. The stitch pattern in the sample swatch is random. In practice, everyone should refer to the chart for knitting. After completing it, take out the first part. Transfer the held loops to the circular needle on the left side. Make sure the right side of the fabric is facing up. You can see that the short row section matches up perfectly. For the shorter version, knit directly onto the loops of the first part. For the longer version, you need to add one whip stitch increase. Place your finger above the yarn. Make a loop by wrapping the yarn clockwise. Place it on the right needle. The whip stitch increase is now complete. Continue knitting on the first part. Let me emphasize this again. For the shorter version, do not add a whip stitch increase here. Keep the junction slightly tight. Pull the yarn tail tight when fastening off. You can tie a knot and weave in the yarn tail on the wrong side of the fabric. You may want to fasten off with a few extra stitches. Trim excess tail. Continue to finish this row. Row 1 is now complete. For the next row, work purl stitches on the wrong side. When you reach the whip stitch increase point, simply pick up the loops and continue knitting as usual. For the rows on the back of the body, continue following the chart. Complete it. That concludes the explanation for the body section. Next, we will learn about the front panel. Start decreasing underarm stitches. Use the same method as for the back piece underarm decreases. After completing this, continue knitting. Leave space for the neck opening. Divide and knit the left and right shoulders separately. Begin with the left shoulder. Decrease on the left side. Work even on the right side. End with short rows to form the sloping shoulder. Finally, bind off loosely. Then join the yarn and bind off at the neck opening. Knit the right shoulder. Decrease on the right side. Work even on the left side. End with short rows on the left to form the sloping shoulder. Finally, bind off loosely. The specific method is similar to the final steps for the back piece. Everyone should refer to the pattern to complete it. This concludes the explanation of the front piece knitting.